Trigger and Pulchra are the new stun agents added in version 1.6. Both utilize the new Aftershock mechanic to deal daze from off-field, making them perfect to pair with an on-field DPS agent like Billy. But are they any better than the other current teammate options for Billy? Hi, I'm Peebus, and today we'll go over the possible teams and playstyles for using Trigger and Pulchra with Billy, and discuss their power level compared to other options like Caesar, Astra, and Nicole. Before we start, a quick disclaimer that all the calculations shown in this video should be taken with a grain of salt. Zenless is a very dynamic game, and especially for an agent like Billy, who has a significant chunk of his damage come from dodge counters, various factors such as team composition, enemy matchup and attack patterns, as well as player skill and playstyle, can dramatically change the number of dodge counters used and therefore damage dealt in a single cycle. I've taken the liberty of assuming the same rotation both in and out of stun for all the calculations in this video, so as to compare strictly only buff quality. But keep in mind, this does not take into account factors such as time to stun or Astra's ability to proc additional chain attacks. Now, back to the video. Pulchra is the A rank alternative of the two, and she shares elements with Billy, activating his additional ability. Her aftershocks depend on a special resource, which only refills upon using EX Special, Ultimate, Chain Attack, or Assist Follow-up. Since EX and Ultimate depend on energy resources and Chain Attack is only available after stun, the main source of these points is going to be her Assist Follow-up. This makes her play very similar to Caesar, where the DPS spends most of the time on field, and you only switch her to do an evasive assist, then go back to the DPS. However, Pulchra differs from Caesar in a few important ways. First of all, you'd think you'd be able to do the same M2 DP assist that works with Caesar, where you do a rolling shot right before a perfect assist to trigger both a dodge counter on Billy and a parry on Caesar, but in practice it is very difficult to get the dodge counter to actually trigger because of the time slow on the evasive assist. Secondly, Pulchra is incredibly assist point hungry. Both her evasive assist and her assist follow-up each consume 1 assist point, making it so when you refill her gauge by evasive assisting, you always consume 2 points. Even normal defensive assists consume only 1 point against lighter hitting enemies, and it's a huge difference from Caesar, who always only consumes 1. Considering how important perfect assists are for decibel generation, if you're not careful, this can hurt Billy, who always wants his ult ready during stun due to how dominant his ult is in his damage distribution. Also, Pulchra's aftershocks only activate when the on-field agent uses a special attack. This could be annoying for Billy, who wants to save EX specials for the stun window, but can be remedied by using the third agent special instead, such as Nicole's EX special. However, the biggest reason why Pulchra can never compete with Billy's premium supports is their extreme lack of buffing capabilities. Billy is by nature a hypercarry agent, and in a game where you only have 3 team slots, every slot needs to be able to effectively funnel damage into him. When Billy has other options like Caesar and Trigger who can effectively do daze while also having huge secondary buffs, Pulchra's pitiful 30% damage bonus, which only benefits Billy at M6, has no chance of winning, especially since Billy already has 50% damage bonus from his core passive, 30% from M6, and 100% on his ult, saturating the stat so much that Pulchra's measly 30% is like a drop in the ocean. That being said, this is only when comparing Pulchra to premium alternatives. If you're a newer player who hasn't had the chance to pull Caesar, Astra, or Trigger, Pulchra is a significant upgrade over the base option of A rank anby, who provides no buffing whatsoever and has terrible synergy with Billy due to her stunning too fast for Billy to build up his ult for the stun window. A skilled player with great stats can beat most of the content in the game with the basic team of Billy, Pulchra, Nicole, which you would have a hard time doing if you use anby instead. Speaking of Billy, Pulchra, Nicole, this is the best Billy team for someone without any of his premium supports. This team has pretty great synergy with a fairly straightforward game plan. Wait until the enemy is about to attack, rolling shot DP assist into Pulchra, pass through Billy's quick assist to Nicole, and use her EX before switching back to Billy, which both reapplies her buff and kicks off Pulchra's aftershocks. And that's pretty much the only Billy Pulchra team worth talking about. While the damage potential might be higher if you subbed Nicole out for Astra, having that option also means you can just sub out Pulchra instead for an even better team. You would only use this team if you needed Nicole for another team, but it's a pretty decent team, besides the fact that it's inconvenient to use Astra's special to proc Pulchra's aftershocks. Lucy and Rena can sub for Nicole for better buff uptime, but you'll be sacrificing stronger buffs in exchange, further exacerbating the lack of buffing on a team with Pulchra already on it. Trigger Pulchra often stuns too fast and leaves Billy without ult during stun, and zzzero fights over assist points with Pulchra on top of having terrible damage. In summary, Pulchra is an okay free-to-play option for Billy that should be the first upgrade for players without zzzero, Astra, or Trigger, but should be ditched for any of these options as soon as you get the chance to pull them. In no circumstance should one try to force an M6 Pulchra just for Billy unless you really like her, since Billy's premium supports are both much better and more guaranteed to obtain, and I don't recommend building her for Billy if you already have any of these options. Alright, let's move on and talk about Trigger. Trigger is basically the S-rank version of Pulchra, so she's better in pretty much every way except for the fact that she doesn't activate Billy's additional ability, severely limiting her team options. She provides a decent 35% stun multiplier that applies both during stun and out of stun, and she requires very little field time after her initial setup. Since Billy likes being on field doing dodge counters, she might be the best option for Billy, if you have her signature weapon. Here are the 1 cycle damage calculations for 3 of M0R0 Trigger's teams compared to 3 of the pre-existing teams before Trigger's release. Note that Astra Nicole is a bit of an outlier because double support comps tend to have longer cycles due to a lower days output. If you compare the 3 Nicole teams, you can see that M0R0 Trigger's buffs tend to have a decently lower impact on damage than zzzero or Astra's. However, if you look at the same teams but with R1 signatures on all the limited agents, wow. In particular, the damage increase on the Trigger Nicole team is 21%, the highest out of any single W engine or Mindscape out of all of Billy's supports, dwarfing the 6% from zzzero sig and less than 1% from Astra's. The reason for this huge difference is the 25% defense shred, which, while great on its own, becomes massive when stacked with Nicole's 40% defense shred due to the unique property that defense shred gets better the more you have of it. But while Trigger Sig is the most value out of all of Billy's support W engines in Mindscapes, zzzero and Astra's M1s actually result in a higher total damage when compared to M0R1 Trigger. Even if her damage numbers are lower in this case though, it doesn't mean that Trigger can't beat out zzzero or Astra in certain situations. Billy is unique in the Zenless roster in that he doesn't have a clear best in slot team, since the best performing team changes based on the enemy matchup and game mode. Trigger deals more days than Astra and can beat her out in situations that require a fast initial stun, such as Shiyu defense or certain deadly assault stages. Also, remember that agents deal more days to enemies that are weak to their element. In particular, Trigger is great at dealing with a lot of the electric weak enemies that don't use a lot of defensive assistable moves and are therefore hard for zzzero to deal with, such as the Unknown Corruption Complex, Shielded Defender, Specialized Assault Bomber, Hans, and Greta. Of the 3 Trigger teams I showed before, Trigger Nicole is probably your best bet in most situations, especially if you have her Sig. Trigger zzzero tends to perform the worst in both damage and gameplay, since this team tends to deal too much daze and stun before Billy has his ult. The last team, Trigger Astra, is pretty interesting. This team doesn't actually activate Billy's additional ability, meaning he loses the 100% damage bonus on his ult that he usually has. However, due to the sheer power of Astra's humongous buffs, it's able to barely beat out Trigger Nicole without Sig, and still does great damage with Sig. This team is one of the easiest to play since Trigger and Astra barely need any field time, and is also the team with the best out of stun buffs out of all the Billy teams, making it great against enemies that take a while to daze or cannot be dazed. In conclusion, Trigger is a decent upgrade for Billy players if you don't have zzzero or Astra. If you do, she is still a decent side grade that can outperform either of them in certain situations. If you do pull her and have extra pulls, I also recommend that you pull her Sig, since it's great value and synergizes great with Nicole. Anyway, that'll be it for this video. Like this video if I've triggered your desire to do so, subscribe for more Billy, ZZZ, and gaming content, and I'll see you in the next one. Peace.